Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the Russian economy and specifically what's happening with natural gas. Prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, natural gas was one of the biggest earners for Russia. It equated to around 30% of all income that Russia was receiving. And the reason for that was twofold. Firstly, Russia has the largest supplies of natural gas out of any country in the world. They're sitting on around 24% of the total global supply. And the reason that those natural gas reserves were so valuable and lucrative was that the world wanted to move away from carbon emissions. And the old-fashioned method of producing electricity of burning coal to drive the turbines was being replaced by natural gas, because natural gas produces around 50% of all of the carbon emissions that coal does. So this was seen as being an environmentally friendly way of producing electricity. And as a result of that, the countries of Europe set up facilities and piped gas directly from Russia. But unfortunately, from Russia's point of view, as soon as it invaded Ukraine, the majority of countries in Europe said they no longer wanted to buy that Russian gas, and they all started to move towards other ways of producing electricity and also sourcing liquefied natural gas from other countries. And in today's video, I want to provide you with an update as to what's happening, because there's been some really interesting developments. Firstly, the countries in Europe are using less natural gas. They're making a conscious effort to try to use less power and also use more renewable energy. So I'll have a look at what's been going on with regards to consumption and usage patterns and the production of electricity in Europe. They're also increasing their liquefied natural gas capabilities and sourcing more of that from other countries. So I'll have a look at what's been going on with regards to the global supply of LNG. I'll also give you an update on the current situation with regards to European storage of natural gas. Because the way that most of these countries get through the winter period is to store large amounts of natural gas in their facilities. And they can draw down on those facilities at times when demand exceeds supply. And then we'll talk about why the reduction in the demand for natural gas and also Russia's inability to be able to increase its exports of liquefied natural gas are hurting the Russian economy. But before we get started on all of that, I'd like to say once again, thank you so much to everybody that's bought me a coffee and sent me a YouTube super thanks. Really appreciate that. If I haven't sent you a direct message, I apologise about that, but thank you so much. Whenever I receive a notification about these things, it really does give me a boost and gives me some more motivation to keep making these videos. And if you'd like to see more face-to-face videos, be able to get early access and avoid the adverts, then please check out my Patreon channel. However, if you don't like Patreon and you'd still like to support the channel, please have a look below where you'll find links to buymeacoffee.com as well as YouTube's super thanks and membership scheme. This chart shows the countries with the largest natural gas reserves in the world, and as you can see, Russia has by far the largest gas reserves, holding more than 24% of the total global supply. The next biggest country is Iran, who have 17%, followed by Qatar at 12.5%, the United States at 5.3%, Saudi Arabia 4.2%, Turkmenistan 3.8%, United Arab Emirates 3.1%, Venezuela 2.8%, Nigeria 2.6%, and the country with the 10th largest supplies is China with 2.4%. And what this table shows is that Russia's gas reserves are actually larger than the combined reserves of the USA, Saudi Arabia, Turkmenistan, United Arab Emirates, Venezuela, Nigeria, and China. And the reason that this is important is that over the last 30 years, as the world has become more environmentally conscious and wanted to reduce carbon emissions, gas was seen as a far more attractive product than coal for use in the production of heat, electricity and industrial purposes. So gas consumption overall has increased significantly, and this has obviously been beneficial to Russia. And prior to the war in Ukraine, income from natural gas sales represented around 1/3 of Russia's total income. Now, before we go on any further today, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Galaxy Lamps. Have you ever dreamt of having a starry night sky right in your room? Well, this Halloween you could achieve exactly that with the Galaxy Projector. If you're looking for a magical touch to your haunted house, then the Galaxy Projector could be exactly the thing that you're looking for, because it isn't just a light, it turns your space into an otherworldly planetarium. And the great news is that it's on sale right now. The Galaxy Projector is ideal for setting the tone this Halloween. However, it can be used to set the mood all year round because it's a smart lamp. Through the use of its app, your phone can control all the magic. With shades of ghoulish green to phantom purple, you can control brightness, rotation and more. If you've got Alexa or Google Assistant, you just say the word and the Galaxy projector will obey, changing its settings, turning on and off without lifting a finger. And there's no need to fear a monstrous electricity bill this Halloween, as the Galaxy projector is energy efficient. So if you're looking to treat yourself this Halloween or for a fantastic present for somebody else, then check out the sale by clicking in the link below. The largest use of natural gas in Europe is for power generation, so basically it's used in power stations to create electricity. It produces far less carbon emissions than coal, and there has been a conscious move away from coal towards gas over the last 30 years. And as you can see from this graphic, power generation represents around 31% of all gas used in Europe. The second highest usage is in households, where it's piped directly to houses for heating and cooking purposes, and that equates to around 24% of all gas usage in Europe. And the third largest use of gas is in industry, where it's used in a variety of different industrial processes, and that equates to around 23% of all gas used in Europe. And this graphic, produced by visualcapitalist.com, shows the predominant sources of electricity generation in Europe in 2021, so prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And in terms of the colour coding here, the countries that are shown in green have the largest percentage of their electricity produced by nuclear. Those shown in orange are using natural gas as their main form of electricity production. Those shown in black are using coal. Those in dark blue are using hydro, light blue wind, and pink is solar. And what this graphic shows is that the countries that had the highest dependence on gas prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine were the Netherlands, Italy, the United Kingdoms, Greece, Latvia, and Moldova. However, natural gas in total equated to 20% of all of the electricity being generated by the EU, and a lot of that natural gas was being imported by European countries directly from Russia. And this table shows the countries that had the highest exposure to Russian gas imports in 2021. And as you can see right at the top of this list, with a huge amount of exposure, was Germany, as a result of the Nord Stream pipeline that was laid under the Baltic Sea, that was delivering huge amounts of natural gas directly to Germany. And if you follow the channel, I'm sure you'll be aware that the Nord Stream pipelines were subsequently blown up. The investigation into that matter was inconclusive. However, there are a lot of rumours as to who's behind that. The country with the second largest exposure to Russian gas imports was Italy, followed by Turkey, the Netherlands, Poland, France, Czechia, Hungary, Slovakia, Spain, Romania, Bulgaria, and Greece. Now, since the start of the war in Ukraine, there have been two major developments in terms of European use of gas. Firstly, there has been a huge increase in the import of liquefied natural gas, which is basically gas that's converted into a liquid form, then exported over the sea, and then transformed back into gas to be used in the gas networks. And the second big development has been the conscious reduction in the use of gas. This chart shows the total level of natural gas imports for the European Union for 2021, 2022 and 2023. And the scale on the left-hand side of this chart is shown in millions of cubic meters of gas. And in terms of the figures for 2023, we've got the data up to week 41, which ended on the 18th of October. The pink line at the top represents the imports for 2021. The red line in the middle represents imports for 2022, and the blue line at the bottom represents imports for 2023. And if we have a look at the very latest data for week 41, you can see that in 2021, the total amount of gas imports was 6.8 billion cubic meters. That figure dropped to 6.6 billion cubic meters in 2022, representing an overall reduction of 3%. However, the figure for 2023 is down to 5.8 billion cubic meters, which represents a reduction of almost 15% compared with the figure for 2021. And this chart shows the level of gas imports directly from Russia to the European Union over the same 3 years. And this shows that in week 41 of 2021, Europe imported 2.6 billion cubic meters from Russia. However, by week 41 of 2022, that figure was down to less than 600 million cubic meters. and the level has remained the same in 2023. And the reason that there are still some imports coming directly from Russia is that a number of countries are still struggling to be able to replace the gas that was coming in those pipelines. And so the European Union has given dispensation to the landlocked countries particularly to keep buying Russian gas until they can find a cost-effective solution. And the reduction that we've seen in 2022 and 2023 represents a fall in the total volume coming from Russia of almost 77%. And in terms of where those additional gas supplies are coming from, this chart shows the level of liquefied natural gas imports for the European Union for the 3 years. And this shows that in week 41 of 2021, the European Union imported 1.1 billion cubic metres of gas. In 2022, that figure increased to 2.6 billion cubic metres. And in week 41 of 2023, the figure was 2.1 billion. And the reason that the level has fallen in 2023 is twofold. Firstly, September and October have been a very mild period. It's been very warm weather, and therefore usage is down. And also, as we discussed earlier, the European Union has made a conscious effort to use less gas and try to produce electricity from other sources. In terms of proving that the European Union is successfully moving away from using natural gas, this chart shows the breakdown of all electricity produced in the EU in August 2023. The scale on the left-hand side of this chart is percentages going from 0 at the bottom to 26% at the top. The blue bars represent the figures for 2022, and the green bars represent the figures for 2023. So if we start off by looking at the movement year on year in the usage of fossil fuels, you can see that in 2022, 20% of all electricity in the EU was produced using natural gas, and 19% was produced using coal. So classic fossil fuels represented 39% of all electricity generation. If we now look at the figures for 2023, you can see that natural gas has reduced to 16% and coal has reduced to 12%. So the total between these two fossil fuels today is 28%. So that represents a reduction of 11% of the total electricity generated by the EU. And in terms of how that electricity is being generated, the biggest single source of electricity generation is nuclear, which in 2022 represented 23%, and in 2023 that's increased to 25%. The next two biggest sources of electricity generation, which have increased the most over the last 12 months, are wind, which has increased from 10% to 14%, and hydro, which has increased from 11% to 14%, and very close behind these two is solar, which has increased from 11% to 13%. So in terms of the three renewable energies, wind, hydro and solar, the European Union has increased its percentage share from 32% in 2022 to 41% currently. And this obviously reduces the European Union's dependence on both gas and Russia. In terms of looking at the reduction in gas demand across each country, this chart compares the demand for natural gas in 2022 and the first 2 quarters of 2023 with the average usage between 2019 and 2021. Now, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the European Union issued a directive to all of its member states to actively reduce the amount of power that its consumers were using. Industries in all of these countries were asked to come up with more effective ways of using power, and households were asked to turn their thermostats down by 1 degree. And if we start off by looking at the comparison of gas demand for 2022, you can see that the total demand figure is negative for every single country in the European Union. So that shows the benefit of this initiative that was brought in by the EU. And if we change the ranking of this table to see which countries achieved the biggest reductions in gas demand, you can see that Finland came out top with a total reduction of 48%, followed by Sweden, who reduced their demand by 42%, Lithuania 29%, Latvia 27%, the Netherlands, Estonia and Denmark 22%, Luxembourg 21%, Croatia 19%, Belgium 16%, Romania and Germany 14%, Slovakia and Bulgaria 13%, and the overall total for the whole of the European Union was a 12% reduction for the whole of 2022. And if we now look at the data for the second half of 2023, you can see that European countries have maintained this low level of usage. The vast majority of all of the figures on this table are once again negative. And I think what we're seeing here is that Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent sanctions that were applied against Russia has accelerated both the thought process of using less energy, trying to be more energy efficient, and also moving towards more renewable forms of electricity production. Now, clearly countries in Europe are still using large amounts of gas, despite the fact that they're now increasing the amount of renewable energy that they're generating. And one of the ways that European countries will get through the winter period is by stocking up on gas, by filling their storage areas. And the storage that countries are using are either man-made facilities, or in many cases gas is stored underground. And this table shows the latest percentage storage levels for all of the European Union. And we start off by looking at this data in terms of the percentage capacity filled. You can see that Portugal, Romania and Spain officially have recorded more than 100% of their capacity filled, which is quite incredible. If you're working in percentages, to have more than 100% is a little bit confusing. However, what that means is that they currently have more gas stored than the official capacity of those facilities. So they've managed to get a bit more gas in than they originally thought they could. We then have 6 countries that are showing their capacity as more than 98% filled: Poland, France, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Italy and Germany. And in fact, you can see here that the overall average for the European Union is 98.18%. The next 4 countries are showing just under 98% capacity, being the Netherlands, Austria, Belgium and Denmark. Bulgaria and Hungary are just under 97% full. Latvia, the United Kingdom, Croatia and Sweden are sitting at just under 96% full. And the last 2 countries on this list are Ukraine, where the storage capacity is around 39% full, and Ireland, that doesn't have any official storage capacity. If we now change the ranking on this chart to show the percentage of the annual consumption of that country that's covered by the amount of gas that they've got in storage. And what this chart shows is that there are currently only 2 European countries that have sufficient storage facilities to cover the full amount of their annual consumption. Latvia, which actually has 233% storage, so basically it has enough storage to be able to sell gas to other countries. The other country that has more than 100% storage, being at 105%, is Austria. The country with the next highest percentage storage is Hungary at 64%, followed by Slovakia at 61%, Ukraine 56%, Czech Republic 52%, Denmark 49%, the Netherlands 45%, Romania and France at 30%, Germany 28%, Italy 26%, Bulgaria and Poland 18%, Croatia 16%, Spain 9%, Portugal 6%, Belgium 5%, the United Kingdom and Sweden 1%, and as we discussed earlier, Ireland doesn't have any storage capacity. So what this table shows is that although the vast majority of European countries have now filled their storage levels, most of them will still need to source additional gas to keep their supplies going throughout the winter period. And a large chunk of this gas will be liquefied natural gas. As we discussed at the start of this video, Russia has the largest natural gas reserves out of any country in the world. And you may be sitting there thinking that now that it's lost its supply deal with Europe, all it needs to do is convert that gas into liquefied natural gas, put it onto ships and sell it to countries like China and India, in the same way as it's done with its oil supplies. However, unfortunately for Russia, it's not quite as simple as that, because in order to convert gas to liquefied natural gas, you have to have a huge facility, and these facilities cost tens of billions of dollars to establish. And unfortunately for Russia, they simply don't have enough spare capacity to be able to convert all of the lost gas sales into liquefied natural gas sales. This chart shows the liquefied natural gas exports for the 9 largest LNG producers between 2018 and the first half of 2023. And the scale on the left-hand side of this chart is shown in billions of cubic feet per day. So if we start off by looking at the situation for the USA, which is the country that has increased its LNG exports the most over the last 4 years. In 2018, the USA was exporting around 2.75 billion cubic feet of LNG every day. However, as you can see from the almost vertical line here, by 2022, those exports had increased to more than 10 billion cubic feet per day. And in the first half of 2023, the LNG exports were up to 11 billion cubic feet per day. So over the course of the last 4.5 years, the USA have increased their exports of LNG by 4 times. And they are now the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas. The world's second largest exporter of LNG today is Australia, who've increased their exports from 8.75 billion cubic feet per day in 2018 to 10.75 billion cubic feet today. Qatar is the world's third largest exporter of LNG, having increased its daily exports from around 10 billion cubic feet per day in 2018 to 10.5 billion today. And I think that relatively modest increase over the last 4.5 years is really interesting, because Qatar is an oil-rich nation and therefore has access to large amounts of capital. However, despite that, it hasn't managed to increase its LNG production because these facilities take a long period of time to construct and do involve large amounts of investment. The next country on the table is Russia, which is the world's fourth largest exporter of LNG. And you can see that in 2018, Russia was exporting around 2.5 billion cubic feet of liquefied natural gas per day, and today it's exporting just over 4 billion cubic feet. However, the large increase in terms of its output was actually achieved in 2019, and Russia hasn't brought any new facilities online since the war in Ukraine started. And this is one of the biggest challenges that Russia is facing, because in order to increase its LNG exports and therefore convert some of the natural gas that's sitting under the ground that's no longer being sold to Europe, it needs to build new facilities. But that is a big challenge when you don't have access to capital or the expertise. The world's fifth largest exporter of LNG is Malaysia, which exports around 3.5 billion cubic feet per day. The sixth largest exporter is Nigeria. However, interestingly, its LNG exports have actually fallen over the last 4.5 years. The seventh largest is Algeria, exporting around 1.5 billion cubic feet per day, followed by Indonesia and Oman, which are both exporting a similar figure. This chart shows the movement in Russia's daily income received from the sale of its fossil fuels, dating back to January 2022. Now, if you follow the channel, you'll be familiar with this chart. We've looked at it a number of times before. But the reason that I wanted to highlight it again in this video is to show how the income from natural gas and liquefied natural gas has fallen significantly over the last 18 months. And in terms of the colour coding, the figures that we're most interested in here are the gas sales via pipeline, which are shown in orange, and the LNG figures that are shown in beige. So basically the brown section towards the top of this chart. In January 2022, Russia was earning around 250 million euros per day from gas sales and an additional 70 million euros from LNG sales. So in total, Russia was making around 320 million euros per day, which equates to around $350 million. And on an annualized basis over 365 days, that equates to $130 billion worth of income. If we now look at the figures for September 2023, which are on the far right-hand side of this chart, you can see that the section that we're looking at has reduced significantly. And Russia today is receiving around 40 million euros of income for gas sales and 50 million for LNG sales. So that totals around 90 million euros per day, which equates to around $100 million. So on an annualized basis for 365 days, that equates to around $36 billion. So over the last 18 months, the total income that Russia is receiving on an annualized basis for combined gas sales has reduced from $130 billion to $36 billion, which represents an annual reduction in income of $94 billion. And when you take into account the fact that the exchange rate between the US dollar and the ruble has reduced from around $1 to 60 rubles to the current level of $1 to 95 rubles, the purchasing power impact of that is even greater. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video really to give you an update as to what's happening in Europe with regards to natural gas supplies, because this was one of the biggest issues and the biggest challenges facing the European Union when Russia decided to invade Ukraine, because most countries came out and said, we no longer want to buy any energy products from Russia. However, the conundrum facing all of those countries was, how do you get around that when your entire infrastructure has been built, assuming that you're going to get gas piped directly to all of your electricity stations in your country? As we've talked about in today's video, obviously there's the alternative of liquefied natural gas. But in order to be able to utilise LNG, you have to have a regasification facility, because when those ships arrive with all of the gas in a liquid form, you need to be able to convert that back into gas and then feed it into your network. And of course, things like that take time and also involve a huge amount of investment. And over the last 18 months or so, we've seen that investment being made heavily by countries like Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands. And as we've seen from today's data, the European Union is now in really good shape in terms of those alternative supplies. And the data that we looked at in terms of storage shows that virtually every country in the EU has its storage completely full, waiting for this winter period. And so far, the European Union has had the benefit of a warm autumn period. It's been unseasonably warm. In fact, records have been broken in many countries in terms of the temperatures that have been achieved. So I guess there is a minor benefit to global warming, certainly in the short term for the European Union. And of course, the other thing that we've discussed in today's video is the European Union has been making active moves towards reducing the amount of power it's using, and specifically natural gas. And we saw from the data that year on year between 2022 and 2023, there has been a marked reduction in the amount of electricity being generated by natural gas and coal. And the biggest moves in terms of the generation of that electricity have been in wind, hydro, and solar. So Europe is moving away from its dependence on fossil fuels. Obviously, it's going to be a long period of time before the European Union gets to the point where it doesn't rely on any coal or natural gas. But there's certainly been an acceleration of the programs over the last 18 months. And the catalyst for that has been Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the need to stop buying Russian natural gas. So the European Union looks in good shape. I don't think we're at risk of any crisis appearing in Europe over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, even if we do get a really cold spell. But if you look at the situation from Russia's point of view, there are some major downsides here. Firstly, Russia is sitting on the world's largest supplies of natural gas, almost 25% of the global reserves. And that, you think, should be a highly valuable asset that Russia can monetize for the next 50 years. And prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia was earning over $130 billion per year from the sale of that natural gas. However, since the invasion started, those sales have reduced dramatically, and Russia's lost over $90 billion worth of annual income as a result of the sanctions that are being applied. And the biggest problem that Russia faces is that, unlike oil, it can't just sell all of that natural gas to countries like India and China, because it doesn't have the pipelines in place to be able to do that. And in order to make overseas sales, it would need to convert that natural gas into LNG. And to do that, you need to have these huge facilities. And Russia simply doesn't have any spare capacity. And unfortunately, it doesn't have anybody that wants to invest to build these facilities, because historically that was being done by the West, who no longer want to put any more money into Russia. And also, one of the problems that Russia is facing is that it's lost access to expertise and technology as a result of the sanctions. So that's a real triple whammy from Russia's point of view. They've lost income, they've lost the capability, and they've lost access to capital. So what that means is that Russia are really going to struggle to be able to convert the gas that's sitting under the ground, these huge supplies, into cash, because nobody wants to buy pipeline gas from Russia anymore. Europe have decided that's not going to happen. And even if this war stopped tomorrow, the European countries wouldn't switch that gas back on, because they found alternative ways of doing things, either sourcing LNG from other countries or producing electricity using renewable energy. So the current situation represents a sea change from Russia's point of view. This isn't just a short-term blip, a reduction in income for 1 or 2 years. The current situation and the change in the way that the European Union is doing things means that there's a real possibility that Russia won't be able to monetize most of its underground gas reserves, because demand is falling for natural gas and other countries have stepped in and filled the gap that Russia left in the market. So once again, I think this shows the long-term impact that the war in Ukraine is having on Russia. It's gone from being the world's biggest supplier of a fossil fuel that was in high demand to falling down the league tables and actually making a lot of countries decide that maybe they don't want to rely on natural gas anymore and that they should be relying on renewable options instead. So the overall summary of today's video is that the European Union today is in a much stronger position than it was 18 months ago at the start of the war. It's managed to find alternative supplies and alternative ways of doing things that have replaced its previous dependence on Russian natural gas. But unfortunately, from Russia's point of view, they haven't been able to find alternative buyers because they simply haven't been able to deliver LNG in volume to replace those lost gas sales. And there is a real possibility that Russia's actions have accelerated the move towards renewable energy, and that Russia will be unable to monetize the vast majority of its gas that's still sitting under the ground. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.